Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamualaikum and a very warm welcome to World This Morning. I am your host Hajra Sati and you're watching World This Morning on a very fine sunny morning in Islamabad. It is Monday, the start of the week and also the end of the May. So this brings us back to the topic where the June is about to start. Children's summer vacation is about to start, and that reminds me of the old days when we used to go to our nani's house or dadi house, and where every cousins would entire family would gather, and we would have really fun days gathering there, celebrating and enjoying the vacations. And it was just not about the vacation, it was also about the summer homework. And I do remember there was one particular facet that still stands out when I was doing my summer vacation homework. It was about the book reading. So I remember back in those days, there was this concerted effort by the schools, by the teachers to inculcate the habit of reading books among the children. And when I was growing up, I was really fond of reading books because my mother was also a book reader and she used to take us, all children, to the library. And I feel no children library is complete without the Enid Blyton's books. So be it Famous 5, Secret 7, it was a wonderful reading there. And then we went to the Roald Dahl's Matilda and Witches, and it was such a wonderful read, and especially by these authors, because writing for children is a special art, because you need to go to their level and have a very fascinating sort of a creative expression, creative ideas, constructing the entire world out there. And when I grew up a little bit more, I was fascinated by the Nancy Drew novels because I was into the genre of detective mysteries and whatnot, and also the famous Agatha Christie novels because my mom used to read that and she would recommend it to me. So we would have really good conversation regarding books, regarding mystery, regarding novels and whatnot. And then when I grew up further, I think I was back in my 9th or 10th, I was a very crazy fan of Harry Potter. And there was a very fascinating world which was erected by J.K. Rowling. It was totally made on the fiction. There was an entire school there in which used to go there. But we have a really fascinating conversation on the creative fiction, on the book reading culture, and what does it mean in the age of 21st century. But first, it's the top stories. So we are going to our top stories, which is about the former Prime Minister and PMLN Supermo. Nawaz Sharif says 9th of May is a symbol of destruction, but 28th May is the day of pride for the nation. In a recorded message that was played at a public meeting organized at the Liberty Chowk in Lahore, PMLN Supermo vowed to make Pakistan a progressive and developed nation, which we certainly believe in, of course. He also said his government in 1998 was offered billions of dollars in return from refraining away about conducting the nuclear test, but they took the decision in the interest of the country and made Pakistan 7th nuclear power in the world. And that is certainly a day of pride for us. He said Pakistan does not have aggressive posturing against any country, but are fully committed to its defense. And obviously this has been our defense doctrine for quite some time, because obviously we believe in the defensive positioning. We do not believe in the offensive positioning. And he also recalled that all daily use items were affordable while petrol sold at 60 rupees per litre and dollar exchange rate stood at 107 rupees. He added that the government also eradicated terrorism and ended load shedding from the country. And of course, we can really see the impacts of that. And we also remembered those gory days when there was so much load shedding. So we have full trust and confidence in the top leadership of our country. But now moving to another very interesting news, especially for the sports fan out there, for the cricket lovers out there. The Lahore Qalandars 11 beat PCB 11 by 10 wickets in the Yom-e-Takbir T10 exhibition match at the Sports City Narowal. Batting first, PCB 11 scored 119 runs for the loss of 5 wickets in 10 overs. In reply, Lahore Qalandars achieved 120 run target without any loss in just 7.4 overs. Openers Fakhr Zaman and Mirza Tahir Beg shared unbeaten stand of 120 runs. Governor Punjab Muhammad Waliur Rahman and Federal Minister for Planning and Development SN Iqbal were the chief guests. They awarded the trophies and prizes among the players. A large number of spectators witnessed the thrilling match. And certainly it is a very amazing gesture from our entire political leadership to organize this match, because this shows how we celebrate Pakistan becoming the 7th nuclear state, and it is the honor for us as a nation. So now coming back to our conversation regarding fiction, regarding the book reading culture, and especially instilling this culture among the young generation, because I feel that they are literally the ChatGPT generation, because they are hardly interested in reading and writing. But of course, everyone is not like that. There are niched categories or groups of people who still want to do the reading. And obviously, we've seen that in Pakistan used to have a very flourishing literary tradition. And then recently, you will see that the bookshelves are again being filled up by the work which is being produced in Pakistan, and that too from the non-securitization lens. So we have one author in the studio who has produced a lot of translations of the work, and he has also some books to his name. We are very glad that we have been joined by Mr. Arshad Waheed. He happens to be a poet and also a novelist. So assalamu alaikum, sir, and thank you so much for coming to our show. So, Arshad Saab, so you have a book with your name, The Other Days, right? This is the book. And we are very glad that you have authored this book. So, would you like to contemplate upon the broader themes which revolve, and what are the sub-themes which revolve in this book?
I think its main theme is human liberation, while it has to deal with the social constructs and social oppression driven by various ideologies and the way people live, and they want others to live in the same way. So this is its main theme, and it deals with the generation who was young in 60s and 70s.
Yes.
They had dreams, they want to transform the society, they wanted to have a better world for themselves and for their children, and they struggled, and somehow then they got disintegrated, they left the country, they struggled in other countries to find their own way, and after maybe 2 or 3 decades, they came back to this country, to their homeland, and they found it quite a different society from what they had already left behind. So it deals with the themes of migration, identity, relationship between men and women, social constructs which oppress individuals to refrain from what they think is their way of life.
Right.
So this is a whole transformation of like 20-30 years.
Okay.
From starting from 60s and 70s and coming back to the turn of the century, early 21st century.
Yes, and so you've particularly focused on the 60s and 70s, the era of 60s and 70s, and as I can recall, it's a very exciting eras because there's so many competing ideologies that are competing in the ideas of public affair. So you have the manifestation of the liberalism, you have capitalism, then you have socialism, then you have civil rights movements going on, feminism, there were different waves of feminism, feminists were protesting, civil rights movements were protesting. So why is there particular emphasis on the 60s and 70s, and obviously Pakistan was not, immune from all of this ideology, diffusion of this ideology, and what is the general summary or the plot line of this particular book?
You are very right. I mean, 60s and 70s, it was a global.
Yes.
There were trends at a global level.
Yes.
There were national liberation movements. There were human rights movements, and a lot of things were being transformed.
Yes.
People wanted to transform it differently. So Pakistan, as you said, it was not immune to this trend at all. We can see that it was a very lively period,
Yes.
particularly in university campuses, which
Yes.
this novel focuses on.
Yes.
They were, some would say that East is red or East is green or whatever. So they wanted to change very honestly,
Right.
to transform the society. What they thought would be good for, there would be social justice, there would be economic justice.
Wonderful.
Right, and there would be rights of the people
Yes.
without any discrimination
Yes.
on the basis of gender, race. But things didn't turn like that.
Right.
And there were changes in Pakistan.
Yes.
There were dictatorial rules in Pakistan, which almost didn't let that political culture flourish. And then a new generation came in, which was mostly inspired by global movements of fundamentalism or anti-fundamentalism. And these characters of these novels, their own children are affected by that. And that is the whole story, that is the conflict between the two generations actually, which are unable to see the world with a common lens. They have very different lens to see the world. So, that deals, I mean, intergenerational issues this novel deals with. It deals with the issues of human liberation, and what the social pressures are, social constructs driven by various ideologies want people to act in their what they think is correct or not correct.
Yes, so you we were having a very interesting conversation before the red light of the camera went on, and you alluded to a term called I mean fundamentalism, and obviously this has been a term which is very well known, especially in the aftermath of the 9/11, and the kind of impact that term had on our societies, particularly in Pakistan. So and we see this trend. I would like to allude to the Pakistani authors who wrote a lot of English fiction. So, for example, Kamila Shamsi, Mohsin Hamid, and others, the reluctant fundamentalists, other authors. So, there was this particular trend which I found in those books was that they were capitalizing on polarization, on the fragmentation of the society, and it was divided on a very religious lines, and that is the sort of the project that would go out, especially they would tap into the Western audiences, right? And I believe Pakistan is much more than that. Pakistan has such a huge flourishing literary tradition. Its cultural norms are so wide, so diverse across the, I mean, if you analyze the Indus Valley. So, and I feel that there's a huge responsibility, especially on the people who are English writers, who are writing from the lens of Pakistani society. So, why did we find those lenses? And now, since that securitization lens is being broken post 9/11, we see some really interesting flourishing of the literary tradition in Pakistani landscape, right? So, what are what sort of books would you recommend to people out there who love reading out there, especially for the fiction readers?
Well, coming back to your comments, I totally agree with you. Pakistan is much more than, but of course, it has been affected by these trends. And in my novel, I mean, local storytelling traditions are also, I mean, referred to in my story. I mean, story of Heer Ranja is the basic life motif which recurs in its story time and again, and it tells the struggle of women against social oppression, and that is then reflected in political discussion, political discourse, political struggle, and social struggle, and the predicament of family relationships and individual choices. So, all these things reflect in this story. It's not totally a fundamentalism or indifferent. That is just a reference. And that coming back to your second question, what I would recommend for readers. Well, I'm nobody to recommend anything to any. It's people's choices, but I would like them to read, if possible, if they have time, particularly younger generation, if they have time and interest. I mean, they should write great literary novelists and writers who have tried to understand human beings, try to understand human societies through storytelling. I mean, storytelling does not claim on any universal reality, but it illuminates certain aspects of human individuals and human societies. So, they do not give concrete answers, but they inspire you to have questions and to find their own answers.
So for example, some which have inspired you.
Okay, maybe young writers even don't know these writers, but I feel totally stranger to. I mean, currently contemporary, I am very much impressed by Milan Kundera. His novels, his techniques, his themes he deals with. I mean, that's great. Jose Saramago, who wrote Blindness, and Coetzee, who wrote Disgrace. And in older, I mean, classical, we can say classical, Tolstoy and Dostoevsky,
Yeah, yeah.
Kafka, they were great
Tolstoy,
writers.
especially that huge volume book in which he entirely describes how the destruction of I think Moscow takes place. It's a very fascinating read, especially for those who are interested in the classical literature and especially Russian literature. So now moving on, so you also have a hobby and a habit of translating a lot of Western fiction into the Urdu language, right? And you particularly focus on Garcia Marquez novels. So why particularly this author? I mean, why not someone else? So is there a proper thought process behind it, or it was just a random selection of it?
Well, it was not random. I actually translated Garcia Marquez and Kundera both of them. Garcia Marquez translation was my first translation.
Okay, wonderful.
I think it was just, I was overwhelmed and fascinated by the way he was telling the story,
Yes.
the way he was unfolding the events. It was just mesmerizing for me.
Yes.
I enjoyed it and I learnt a lot of things, I mean insights into human behavior as well. And then I immediately thought I must translate it. I mean it was like this, it was not random, but actually there are a lot of great pieces of art and work, I mean around, but when I read it I couldn't hold myself and I just wanted to translate that.
Wonderful. So, Arshad Saab, we have seen that there was this trend in subcontinent of Dastan Goi or the oral storytelling, right? And I feel that the lot of history of the Eastern societies is lot oral, right? It's not that much written. So, and the Western is usually a written. I mean, you would find a lot of novels which were written in that. So Dastan Goi focuses a lot on the Sufi tales of the wisdom, and obviously they were very heroic tales of Islamic heroes who I mean fought, or they were filled with lot of wisdom. But now we see that tradition, we are losing that tradition, and it's almost dead because no one does the Dastan Goi as they used to do back in the days, especially in the courts of the kings, in the courts of the Mughals, or in the Persian courts, right? And being a teacher myself, so I was teaching digital storytelling, and this was my first lecture about the Dastan Goi. And Qissa Khwani Bazaar in Peshawar is famous for that because people used to tell stories in that particular area of Dastan Goi and whatnot. And then there is a lot of hegemony of the West, right? Especially in terms of the knowledge production. So we would see that their ideas, they have very flourishing. And how do you see the comparison between the writers of the first world countries and the writers who are coming from the global south? So what are the main themes that you find which are very different in those two demarcations in the first place?
Well, you have put 3 or 4 questions and it may take some time. I would like to talk briefly on that. Yeah, Qissa Goi and Dastan Goi was a tradition, and it was not only in the courts or in front of the kings, it was with the public as well.
Yes.
I mean, you might have heard the overnight recitation of Heer Ranja or Mirza Sahaba in villages, and there were a lot of groups which used to recite these things and explain it to the public. And same, I mean, but things transform, things change.
Of course.
Now there might not be many opportunities for them to go, and there is a lot of time available to the people sitting in front of Dastan Go and listening to him. So then they take different forms and different shapes in storytelling in a written form. You may find a narrator in a story who is actually doing the work of Dastan Go, who is doing a Dastan Goi. The narrator is telling the stories of he or she may talk of multiple perspectives in the story. So, I mean the trend or the technique of Dastan Goi, it may be oral and it may be written. It is still going on. As you say that Western ideas and our ideas, I think we must not create boundaries in so-called Western and our ideas. We are human beings. We go through common experiences. We have a lot of common challenges. So, it is a process of mutual learning. We learn from them and they might learn from us as well. And it happens. So, we should encourage more and more the opportunities in which they interact, they exchange their opinions and ideas. There is a dialogue between the two on the themes and the techniques of storytelling. All these things should be discussed.
Yes.
So, I do not believe in separating the Western and our ideas.
Right.
We human beings live on this planet. We have differences. We may have diversities.
Yes.
We have our own cultures, but that is not something which should hold truth forever. I mean, cultures transform,
Yes.
language transforms, we transform, our ways of lives transform, and it is all because of interaction between different societies and culture.
Yes.
So, we should not be insecure.
Yes, that's very true, but obviously when someone else is writing about you, so that person might have a different frame of reference through which he writes. But now moving on to our other conversation. So, let's discuss young writers, and I mean in the era of ChatGPT, when you type anything and it would give you very comprehensive sort of an answer. So, what does ChatGPT means for the young writers who are interested in writing? And obviously, it's a very picture saturated century, right? So, we see Instagram, it's all pictures, Snapchat, it's all pictures, TikTok, all pictures, and a lot of people are predicting the death of the book in this century. Do you believe in this assertion in the first place?
I do not know. I mean, very honestly, as far as you have referred to ChatGPT and other things, I have not actually tried it. I don't.
Really?
I have heard of it, but I have not tried it. The thing is, as I earlier said, literature actually gives you questions and some aspects. The things can be like this. It does not give absolute answers. So, ChatGPT perhaps gives you it gives you conclusions. I don't know if it can write fiction as well. I am not aware of that. Number one.
Right.
Number two, even in the beginning, human communication was perhaps through pictures. If you see that,
yes.
so
yes.
maybe we are going back to that. If you say that children are picture centric, I don't know. It's difficult for me to understand and comprehend what our young children are thinking, because maybe I think they are trained in a very different way.
Right.
We have different imagination. So, they will find their way and they will tell us what they would do.
Right.
And we should not be that much disappointed, but let their own understanding of the world, they would tell us what they want to do. Maybe we can just think that as long as we are alive, this storytelling is alive, this book culture is alive. It may die in maybe next 10, 15, 20 years.
Yes. So Arshad Saab, we've seen this trend particularly, I think in the past few days. Roald Dahl has been in the news posthumously, because there was this trend which was introduced by the Puffin, which is a huge book publisher in the West, and they were rewriting a lot of his novels because they find that it was not appropriate, right? So, there's this movement in the literature about the cancel culture, where a lot of his words were changed. So, I remember in his novel of Matilda, so there was Mr. Trunchbull, she was a very fat lady, so the fat has been eliminated, the word fat has been eliminated and replaced by something else. And then the Oompa Loompas, I do remember, they were small creatures, they are gender neutral. So, do you agree with this assertion or this movement in particular, in which they are changing the words, they are rewriting the history just because it was not appropriate in this time? Do you think that that's I mean, authoritarian approach in the literature which has seeped in? What is your opinion about it?
Well, I don't agree with that,
Yes.
because I think who is anyone to decide what is right or what is not right, or who is deciding what is appropriate or what is inappropriate. Kundera in one of his works writes that in coming, I mean, power determines it. So, in coming times, technology and all these things would be more powerful, and they would decide about us.
Yes.
So, but he says that I can't give this right to more powerful technology to decide about me or other artists.
Wonderful.
Number one. So, I agree to that. And secondly, literature or art is about, I mean, it creates something in a certain context. It may be universal, but it may go beyond time limitations.
Yes.
But it is basically something which inspires you to have certain questions, or re-evaluating things.
Right.
Not that you are given, you have to be slaved by given ideas by
Yes.
someone else.
Yes.
So this is again whole against the concept of creation of art.
Yes. Yes.
So if it is done like this, I think that is the death of art. That's
Yes.
not death of book only.
Yes.
So
Yes, so the one last question before we wrap up this segment. So we've seen that there's a lot of appropriation or the concept of doors, doorways or portals. For example, in Harry Potter, there was particular door through which he could pass away. And then in the modern also writing, and especially in the depiction of the fiction dramas, we've seen that there are portals opening up and people can move to another realm, to another world out there, to another universe out there. So do you believe that we humans have this capacity or capability that we will open up borderless sort of an areas where we could freely move and we can overpower hatred with the love? Do you think that that sort of doorless world is possible in the first place?
well, that may be human desire, and it might be it might come true. I don't know.
Yes.
But this is literature and art does create a different realm, different universe.
Yes.
I mean, it tells you,
Metaphorically, yeah.
yeah, and it also is, it's a technique to tell truth in a different way.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't have to reproduce what's actually happening.
Yes.
It has to be given different shades and techniques and okay.
Right.
So that may be human dream.
Right.
It may be possible, it may not be. I don't know.
Right, right. Thank you so much, Arshid Saab, for this wonderful cross-pollination of ideas about the humans, about the literature and the fiction out there. And this topic fascinates me a lot. Thank you so much for coming here, and thank you so much for bringing your wonderful book. I'll definitely give it a read. And those who are big book readers, please do give it a read and let us know what do you think about this book. So we'll go on a short break, and after that we have some very interesting conversation lined up. So don't go anywhere. After a short break, we will be right back. Thank you. Welcome back. So we had a very interesting conversation regarding books, regarding the human life. What does it mean about the human? So now we have a very interesting discussion lined up, and it is about how human life does have an impact, right? And we are talking in terms of the physical health. What does the physical health means? And obviously, we had observed International Emergency Medicine Day on the 27th of May, and the theme of this year was Your Safety, Our Priority. So what exactly is the emergency medicine? Because for a lay person like me, we always eat medicine when we are in the emergency, right? But what sort of misconceptions do we have about the medicines and how we need to tackle our health, and what does the healthcare out there who do not have access to it and who are in the poverty, they are marginalized communities. So we are very glad that we have been joined by a very wonderful person. He is a doctor in the Maroof International Hospital. He is also the MBBS and also a member of the Royal College of the Surgeons of Edinburgh in the UK. We are very glad that we have been joined by Dr. Amir Abdul Waheed. He is a consultant emergency medicine. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for coming.
Walaikum salam, and thanks for having me.
Right. So Dr. Saab, International Emergency Medicine Day, Your Safety, Our Priority is the theme. What exactly is the emergency medicine in the first place?
Yeah, I think emergency medicine is a branch of medicine which deals with the diagnosis and treatment of unforeseen injury and illness. Say if somebody has an accident, if somebody has an accident, he is brought to the emergency department. Likewise, somebody having a chest pain or stroke is brought to the emergency department. And similarly, people with sudden abdominal pains and problem with breathing and all those things. So we deal with the very first hour of an emergency where life and death decisions can be made, and it makes it really it makes the difference there.
Right. So we've also seen, especially, so you talked about the golden hour before our discussion, before we went on air, and you talked about it's a very important hour in dealing with the patient. So, being a photographer, I am aware of what does the golden hour means, but obviously in the medicine, the term has a very changed connotation. So, what exactly is the golden hour?
Yeah, this is actually this golden hour was coined in respect of the trauma, but now I think it's very true for rest of the diseases as well. So what actually happens in an accident, that there are a trimodial pattern of death. Unfortunately, someone dies on the spot at the scene. That is an immediate death, and then
Right.
you have an early death which happens within an hour to couple of hours,
Right.
and then you have a late death which happens in the days and the months.
Right.
So this is the second part of the death, which is, we said, the
Right.
early part where that golden hour comes into play. And
Right.
if during that 1 hour the patient gets the right diagnosis and the treatment, the outcome is different. So
Right.
that's why we always say that whenever there is an accident, it's very important that the patient is taken to a right place where right diagnosis can be made and he can be treated promptly. So that's the
Right.
importance of the golden hour. Similarly, in cases of sepsis, where you have patients who are having infection, blood infection, the first hour is very important, because during that very first hour, if we can take the blood samples and give them the antibiotics, studies have shown that this improves their outcome
Right.
and survival. So
Right.
that's, I think, in the longer run, in an emergency department, the first hour is the golden hour in all aspects of the disease.
Right, right. So, Dr. Saab, so you are one of the few people in Pakistan, I think 4 to 5 people who are trained in the medicine, in the emergency medicine, right? And that is, alhamdulillah, very distinguished position that you hold. And you alluded to something earlier on in your conversation, which is that you need to have the right sort of diagnosis, especially when there is a trauma or when there is an emergency there. So, what do you mean by the right diagnosis? In the first place, what does this connotation have when it comes to the medical diagnosis? Because obviously diagnosis, do you feel that the diagnosis can be wrong in a lot of times?
I think one thing I have felt and I have seen patients of that nature is that Pakistan has a very high percentage of diabetics, and whenever a diabetic has a heart attack, they don't get a classical signs of the heart attack, which is that they will get a chest pain, or the pain will go to the arm and the jaw, but they might simply have something called an indigestion,
Right.
a pain in the upper part of the abdomen.
Right.
And those are the patients which, if you go to any local clinic or a quackery where they have not been trained to, and they have been not
Yes.
told that this could be a sign of heart attack, so there it can be missed. So if you are coming to a proper place, we know that this is something which is a heart attack,
Right.
and we work towards that.
Right.
So the emergency medicine actually works to rule out the life-threatening problems first,
Right.
and then we go down and say, okay, now
Yes.
that we have ruled out the heart attack, let's look at the other causes of the abdo pain.
Right. So, Dr. Saab, since you're the expert in the field of emergency medicine, and you alluded to the antibiotics, so there's this conversation which is going on about how we need to curtail the impact of antibiotics, because there's a lot of resistance or immunity developing, especially among the population, through excessive use of the antibiotics, right? So, does antibiotic fall under the emergency medicine, and what do you have to say on this debate regarding the antibiotics and on the policy level? So, what are the recommendations that you would like to suggest out to the people who matter in this country?
I think everywhere in the developed world, there is, in every hospital, there is an antibiotic stewardship program,
Right.
where there are certain antibiotics which are only prescribed by infectious diseases consultants.
Right.
Unfortunately, in Pakistan, we have not that type of control in the hospitals especially, and then in the general practice as well.
Right.
We can write the 3rd generation and the 4th generation antibiotics without even having the proper culture and sensitivity reports.
Right.
So I think quite a few hospitals, and like my hospital, we are embarking on these things of developing this antibiotic stewardship program.
Wonderful.
Where not everyone can write every antibiotic, and
Right.
that's the way forward. I think
Right.
we have to, even in the policy making, we have to bring this as mandatory for all the hospitals to have an antibiotic stewardship program.
Right.
The resistance which is developing is just because we are writing antibiotics indigenously without having consideration for the culture and sensitivity reports.
Yes. So, Dr. Saab, let's develop something which you alluded to in our conversation. It's just about quackery and fake spiritual healers in Pakistan. And in Pakistan, we have seen this trend that people generally would like to, and it's not just limited to the rural areas. It's the trend which is quite popular in the urban areas too. Like, people don't go to the doctors if they have any problem when it comes to their physical health. Rather, they would trust these fake spiritual healers and quackery. And we know that how bad that can go in the first place, right? And obviously, they justify their belief and the existence of that disease from the spiritual angle, from the religious angles, right? कि अल्लाह ने ऐसा लिखा हुआ था या हमारे मुकद्दर में ऐसी आनी थी, पेन आना था, something like that, right? So how can we, obviously that is a misrepresentation of Islam. We have seen that Islam has produced very flourishing intellectuals who were really good in the medicine and so in the theology. For example, Jabir bin Hayyan, Ibn Haytham and whatnot, right? So how can we curtail this tendency, especially among the people, that they go to the right person at the right time and get their diagnosis timely? Because, you know, it's sad about it. The cure is always better. Prevention is always better than cure, something like that, right? Yeah. So how do you convince those patients, who have beliefs like this, but obviously it's a misrepresentation?
Yeah, I think this is what I am here today, to create that awareness about this thing. I think information is one thing, and then you provide the proper medical services around the doorsteps. Right. If you have a proper well-developed primary healthcare system, and then you have that facilities available, then people will not go to the quacks and the clinics where are the faith healers. But I think it's mainly about the information and about providing the facilities around the doorsteps. And I hope that if we do these two steps probably, these things will definitely slowly wane. But the other thing is that our regulators, the Islamabad Healthcare Regulatory Authority, is taking a lot of measures in that, that they are cracking down on the quacks and is trying to control these things.
Yes, there is an effort to have this crackdown on it, but we will see that they will then again spring up in some form or in another form, and they're very popular among the people. But moving on our conversations, and let's go back to our concept of universal access towards the healthcare, right? I think Pakistani state is doing wonderfully well in this regard, considering the fact that we do not have that much of a resources as compared to Western countries, and the healthcare is extremely expensive there. So what is exactly your hospital, Maroof International, doing in popularizing the universal healthcare access?
Being a private hospital, we and being the medical director as well, we are following a path where we are trying to make the healthcare affordable for all the population within the community. And I think access to healthcare is resource dependent, which I'm sure you would also know that this all costs, but we need to make sure that this healthcare is accessible for the masses as well. And on that regard, we keep in mind that all of our patients are not the same, they can't pay the same amount of money. So whenever some patient walks into our emergency department, we don't look at their status, whether they can pay or not. We look at the disease, what they are coming with. We provide them that treatment, and believe you me, there have been instances where we have taken the patients from the emergency to the cath lab to open up their blocked heart arteries without even having a conversation about their payment. And I'm really thankful to to our management and to the owners of the hospital that they actually take that as a mission. And I think that's something which I would like all the private hospitals to follow in that regard.
Right, that's wonderful. So as it is said, especially in the everyday adage about it, that prevention is always better than cure, right? So Dr. Saab, we see that there is this general tendency where you see that the diseases are on the rise in general in Pakistan. You would see that the diabetes is inflating, so are the obesity and sugar and other diseases. So do you think that there's something wrong with the way we are living, or our living standards needs to improve a lot? Because the element of mobility is very much reduced now. So we go on our cars, we don't walk that much, and that immobility is contributing a lot of the factors, right? So what do you have to say in this regard?
I tell you, I think there's a very interesting statistic just came out last week that Pakistan is the highest number of diabetic patients in the world. About 33% of our population is diabetic. So that's a lot, and it brings in itself a very heavy burden on the health system as well. And how can you prevent diabetes is that you need to take dietary advice, you need to get yourself regularly checked, and you need to, if somewhere a lot of people are pre-diabetics, that before the diabetics is actually diagnosed, if they can get their blood sugars checked, they can take those necessary steps of avoiding the sugars and carbs, starting to have mobility, changing their lifestyle, changing their food, that they can actually delay the onset of diabetes. And diabetes is the major problem for heart disease, it's a precursor for heart disease, it's a precursor for hypertension, and so on, so forth. So I think prevention, as you said, is better than cure. And how does the prevention comes is by early testing, get your blood pressure regularly checked, get your sugar regularly checked, and change your lifestyle, and start doing some exercises. I think that's going to help a lot.
That's very true. So you mentioned about the pre-diabetic condition, right? So how can we identify a condition which is about to develop, right? So what are the symptoms that we should be cognizant of if they happen or they're going to happen in the future?
Yeah, I think if you have a family history of diabetes, say from one of your parents or both parents, then you're very likely to develop diabetes. So the thing is that once you cross 40, you need to look at your blood sugars once every few months, get your fasting blood sugar checked and see if it is on the rising trend. There is another test called an HbA1c, which actually gives you the blood level of your sugars for the last 3 months. So if you can get that done, and that can give you actually a trend whether it's on the rising side or the lower side. So once you pick it up there, then you can change your lifestyle and food, and then you can prolong the onset of
the healthy life,
health.
right? So thank you so much, Dr. Saab, for putting it out there brilliantly. One last question before we wrap up this segment, which is about the role of the painkillers and the self-medication. So we see that people, lot of the times they're self-medicating. So any small pain they have, they would have the painkiller. So is it a very effective practice? And if not, so what needs to be changed in this regard?
I just tell you something on the lighter note. I read in a hospital there was a sticker there that if you have search your disease on the Google and you want a second opinion, you can look at yahoo.com. So that's not what I think we should advocate. We need to make sure that we don't self-medicate, because we see a lot of patients with kidney diseases which are self-inflicted by the people with the indiscriminate use of painkillers. So we have to be very cognizant of the fact that we don't use painkillers without consulting a doctor. This is very important.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Saab, for coming here, for enlightening us about what does the International Emergency Medicine Day means about, and what is exactly an emergency medicine. And obviously there is this trend, especially Dr. Saab alluded to it, where people are inflicting a lot of diseases on themselves by the very indiscriminate use of the painkillers. So we do have two extremes in our society. So there is this extreme who do not tolerate any amount of the pain. So they they would fetch the painkiller and eat it. And then there is another extreme which would say that we need to tolerate, because tolerance is good and it's a virtue which is admired in our society. So I think we need to have a moderation and go to the expert in this field, who are the doctors who can tell you more about what's wrong with your body. Don't self-medicate. And with that we will end up our segment. And once again we'll say thank you to you, Dr. Saab, for coming here, for having this very enlightened discussion about it. And until next time, it's a goodbye. Allah Hafiz.